Hello friends, today we'll be talking about Venus conjunct K2 South Node. So if you have this conjunction of K2 and Venus in your birth chart, this video will apply because I'll be discussing the combination on its own, as well as in the context of the current transit because Venus is in Virgo and it is going to come up and conjunct K2. And this conjunction is quite significant because everything that Venus signifies, such as love, beauty, intimacy, K2 does not allow for the superficial aspect of these things. It strips off the external layer and really wants to get to the bottom of it. For example, Venus wants to connect, merge, and create harmony. And on the other hand, K2 moves inwards with the aim to dissolve appearances. And K2 has a tendency to drag us back. It's almost as if going into the void, an empty space, places of silence. So it has an inward gaze instead of an external one. And when we think about Venus's signification, a lot of times we're gravitating because of lust, which is external. So as you can see right off the bat, there's dissonance between these two planets. And when we bring Virgo in, I'm just doing an overview right now, we have to remember that Venus is in the sign of its debilitation. Again, Venus is about cooperation, connection, and harmonizing the parts together, while Virgo's operation is about segmentation, separation, refinement, trying to find how to purify the system. And I've made an extensive video about Venus and the sign of Virgo, just a couple of videos behind this current one. If you're interested, you can look into it to see in depth what this combination means. But the point here right now is we got dissonance between K2 and Venus is in its debilitation, which is talking about absolute dissonance in the sign of Virgo. So we got some challenges to negotiate with. And that's what we're going to discuss in this video. And before moving on, I do want to say this. I'm going to make another video about Venus in Virgo and the aspects that it will make. It will be, again, like Mars, heavy loaded aspects coming up towards the end of its transit because it's going to make that opposition to Saturn in the sign of Pisces. And before that, it's going to have a sextile aspect from Jupiter. So we're going to talk about that in another video. And those aspects, we can start to see it from October 6th onwards. In this video, I really just want to focus on Venus conjunct K2 South Node, as well as being in the sign of Virgo. So let's start by separating the two archetypes first. So we're going to be talking about Venus, and then K2, and then their conjunction, and finally what it means when this occurs in Virgo. And as usual, this video is timestamped, so if you feel like you want to jump back and forth, feel free to do so. And with all of that out of the way, let's get right into it. So Venus. Venus is the feminine principle, meaning that its action is one of receptivity. And because of this receptive taking in nature of Venus, we can conceptualize the motion of Venus as convergence. And that's why Venus represents relationships, connections, and unions. So we can imagine Venus as the planet that closes the gap and distances between the parts. It's merging them and it's bringing them into a unity. And one of the magical aspects of Venus, and in the Vedic tradition, Shukra, Venus, is the only god who can resurrect the dead back into life. Mind you, though, Jupiter's son gets the bija and the story goes on. But originally, Shiva gives this bija to Shukra, and Shukra is the one that's able to do this. And when we pay attention to Venus's significations, it's always merging, unifying, and from that unification and merging, some third variation emerges. After all, what is love? Beauty, creation of arts. It's about bringing certain parts together, and by the fact of their union, something new emerges from it. It's like the death of the two by merging and the resurrection of something new. But a topic that I would love to get into much deeper in another video. Getting back into Venus. Venus also represents the five senses, fertility, and the experience of peace that we're all longing for. This is Venus's signification. And that's because Venus harmonizes the parts into a cooperative whole. And this is what aesthetic beauty is about, which is essentially the composition of the parts being harmonized into a whole. Now we got perfect proportion, symmetry. Mind you, symmetry also belongs to Mercury. But what we're talking about essentially, that third variation is a unit of expression that can articulate something where the sum is greater than the parts. Now, let's go to K2. And every video, I'm defining keywords for the planets, but I'm always trying to bring something, some variation, something new so that we grow our vocabulary of what these planets mean. So if there are some repetitions, please excuse me. The key symbols are limited, but the mythologies, the stories, and the analogies that we can make are endless. But Ketu. Now, Ketu's function could not be more different than Venus, because Ketu's motion is inwards, it's downwards, it's backwards, and it's introverted. Ketu in general has a backward gaze. And when you think about it, Venus is converging the parts, creating a union, and from that union is giving rise to a new expression. We're talking about emergence. So we're talking about, if we're going to conceptualize it in terms of timelines, we're talking about a future. It's future oriented. Now, Ketu's backward gaze is pulling everything inwards. And its aim is actually to take the experience, that third variation, take it in, eat it, digest it. And we got to remember, Ketu is symbolically the body of the dragon. The head is Rahu, the body is Ketu. So it's talking about a process of digestion that is essentially about the breakdown of experience, not the making of new experience. And this is very much unlike Venus, where its process gives way to something new. So we can see Venus's function is very much additive. It's not augmenting like Jupiter, but it's additive. The sum is greater than the parts. And Ketu's, on the other hand, is reductive. And Ketu is always reducing all experiences to its core essence. It doesn't care for form, for matter, for shape. And one way to imagine this Ketu business, think about our DNA, for example. And in Vedic astrology, the D12 belongs to your ancestry line. So we're talking about Ketu in a lot of ways. It's talking about your DNA, your genetic composition. And if we take your entire DNA, there are many sequences that are not expressed. It's like as if there were switches, certain light switches are on. So you have this hair color, this eye color, but many of the switches, almost 80% of them are off. So the sequences that are off, they're your genotypes. They're there, but they're not expressed. The phenotypes, like your skin color, your hair color, your height, and etc., those things are expressed. Ketu is like the genotypes, the switches that are off, but it's there. So it's talking about a mysterious essence and our origin, which no longer has a form and an expression, but it's still part of the coding and the DNA of who we are. So in this way, Ketu is talking about internal configuration that goes beyond the shape and the form. And this is one of the reasons why Ketu is related to intensification. It's intense silence that must exist, the void that must exist so that the form can be formulated around it. And Ketu, if we're going to conceptualize it as silence, we can also conceptualize it as darkness. So there are things that can't be seen because we see the world of form. The light is bouncing off of it and we're picking up these patterns and shape that we call the things of the world. Ketu is not related to that part of the world. In some ways, we can again take that backward-looking gaze of Ketu and say that Ketu is about everything that has ever been, while Rahu North Node is about everything that could possibly ever be. And in some strange ways, everything that has ever been still exists in different forms and non-material, tangible, non-tangible aspects of the world. They exist, but they're not accessible. For example, memories. But in the context of our talk right now, we could say that Ketu, its function is to break down appearances, the current expressions, and to reduce form back into its essence. And we have to realize if Ketu is doing this in the world of externalities, in the world of form, appearance, which is our world, look around you, right? In order to make this transition to go from the form into the essence, it can only come through disruption of, let's say, our perception, our feelings, our understanding when it comes to Venus, to the five senses. And that creates chaos for us, which are also significations of the nodes: disruption, chaos, and then transformation and change. So talked about Venus a little bit. We talked about Ketu a little bit. Now, what happens when they come into conjunction with each other? Let's get more explicit about that. So when we say Venus wants to merge and close the distances between things to create that unity, to unify things, we're talking about external motions. Now, Ketu, on the other hand, is all about withdrawal from the external motion. I don't know why my voice just got slower. So in some ways, Venus is saying, look, man, I really want to create beauty. This is my job. This is what I'm here for. And Ketu will meet it with absolute indifference. There's a sense of silence about it. For Ketu, what Venus is trying to do, which is to create that third variation, is just the feeling of appearance. There's a sense of dissatisfaction. So beauty, pleasure, sensual pleasures. When we have this kind of a conjunction, there's a sense of indifference about it. And when we think about these things, these are the things that generally give us the joy of being alive, being human. So bringing Ketu into the mix, it's like a numbing agent almost. You can't extract pleasure from such things anymore. In fact, Ketu can just keep be telling Venus you're being superficial. The person can have a sense of like, okay, I'm gonna get dressed up, but there's a sense of almost like fakeness about it, that this is superficial. What's the meaning of this? Because the Ketu is creating this feeling, I want to know what's underneath it. What's the purpose of why you're doing this? What is beauty's essence? So in a lot of ways, Venus being a planet related to the five senses and the sensual aspect of life, Ketu is pulling Venus away from this. So when this happens, how are we human beings able to connect with the world? We have our five senses, right? Through sight, through taste, smell, touch. Through these aspects, we're able to connect our internal self to the external world and the external to our internal self. So if Ketu is making us withdraw and not to have this, how are we supposed to engage with the external world? And how are we supposed to extract some sort of a pleasure? So these become the conundrum of people who have Ketu-Venus conjunction. I don't know how to enjoy this aesthetic thing that you enjoy. I don't find enjoyment in that thing that you call harmony and peace. It doesn't feel like peace to me. There's always a missing link. And to add to this, because Venus wants to create bonds and harmony, and Ketu essentially wants to dissolve those bonds into a mere silent presence, we can see that the way that we are taught to feel connected to our relationships become a little bit difficult. And some of the outcomes of this kind of a conjunction can be seen when relationships sometimes without a very clear reason just dissolve. And that's because Ketu is removing the surface attraction. It wants the depth of why it's being attracted to something. Or suddenly we can get this feeling with this conjunction, with this transit too, that things that used to taste good, all the sensual pleasure and their charm, like food, beauty, intimacy, they just feel hollow. Another thing you can get with this conjunction is actually a hunger, but a hunger or a thirst for something more spiritual and not so material. And you can see when people have these conjunctions, sometimes they feel very detached from their loved ones and their family members. There's even a feeling of like, I need to leave and go on a search. They want to understand the love and beauty beyond mere appearances. But with all of that said, this conjunction doesn't have to be all grim. Like all conjunctions, all placements, they're going to have their meanings that are burdensome and brutal. But at the same time, when we look at the entire spectrum of life, there's much to be learned, many ways to grow from it. For example, when Venus is conjunct Ketu, it's going to strip away illusions about relationships and love. And Venus can become, when it's dysfunctional, oh my God, idealization about the perfect life, the perfect partner, the happily ever after, the impossibilities that actually makes life miserable. So when you get this kind of a conjunction, that kind of illusion dissolves. So it can point us towards the depth of love. There's a spiritual love, love that transcends material condition, love that is not dependent on its outer form, beauty that is not skin deep or tied into appearance of things, and connection that is not about lust and indulgence, but about the essence of what it means to be connected to someone else. And this is when your partner or you are no longer just in love with your partner, not with their eye or with their ego, not with your body, not with what you got. They are in love with the soul of you in whatever form, whatever shape, condition, or situation you might be in. And if you think about it, isn't that the most beautiful form of love that a human being can attain? And the rarest kind of love. That's why I'm saying, yes, that numbness, that disinterest, that indifference towards the Venetian concepts can take a lot of life's joys away. It can dim it, like it can turn the volume down on it till it's muted. But at the same time, if you know how to work with this, you're looking for profundity of love. beauty, pleasure, enjoyment. And again, going back to the Vedic traditions, this is what the ultimate being, that ultimate consciousness is desiring, right? So to understand that is profound. And this combination can help someone towards that path or on that path. But let's take this conjunction of Venus and Ketu into the sign of Virgo. But before I'm going there, I'm going to take a little break. I thought I was getting better at this because I was starting to do videos without taking breaks. I was like, all right, I'm like, progressing down this, but no, I actually need a break. Go get some water and I will be right back. All right, guys, that was an unexpected break. I went outside. I saw an old neighbor I haven't seen, and we started talking about German philosophers. Now I have to bring my mind back into K2 conjunct Venus in Virgo. Let's do it. So first thing to remember, Virgo is an earth sign. So it's saying something about it being solid and fertile and is of the feminine principle. It's also a dual sign. It's mutable, so it's flexible. But one of the qualities in Virgo is that it's very cautious. And Virgo is always working through practical intellect. So it's about careful study, careful analysis. It pays a lot of attention to details. It has patience and a great sense of duty. It governs work, organization of it, and its management. And it's also related to health, cleanliness, and purity. So now let's explore how is Venus debilitated in the sign of Virgo. As I mentioned earlier, Venus wants to merge and unify. And I talk about this extensively in the previous video, so I encourage you to watch that. And I'll put the link in the description box below about Venus and Virgo. So Venus wants to unify, but Virgo's function is to separate things, to classify them, to categorize them. And then this whole process is to refine things again. And then Venus wants to flow towards sensual enjoyment and pleasure. Virgo doesn't want to merge like that. It wants to actually create segmentations and separations to be able to do its analysis, to understand why is this thing pleasurable? Why is this thing beautiful? So when Venus and Ketu come together to formulate this conjunction in the sign of Virgo, we get some seriously powerful disruptions because we saw that there was dissonance between Venus and Ketu, and then Venus is debilitated in Virgo, more dissonance. So in some ways, Virgo is not allowing Venus to have sensual pleasure because of its overanalysis. So it creates a sense of inhibition about the sensual pleasures of life. Love can be reduced to practical everyday duties and tasks. So it binds love to the act of service, management of life, or just these obligations that you have to carry forth. In a lot of ways, in the sign of Virgo, beauty is just reduced to practical duties, a sense of cleanliness, and things that have a utility. So that decorative, that luxurious feeling of Venus gets erased off. And on a surface level, this is very frustrating because Venus is looking for unconditional love and connection. And Virgo is constantly restricting this and putting conditions or showing Venus how love is bound to certain conditions of life. And then Ketu there is taking away any trace of pleasure that might be there. It's numbing it. So love can feel muted here, like it's dissolving into perpetual silence. Like sometimes I've gone out to eat and then I'll see a couple who are sitting in front of each other for 2 hours and they don't exchange a word, but they know each other's rhythm, for example. They know how to push forward the salt and when, but there's a sense of silence. And then when you put it in the sign of Virgo too, intimacy in general can feel like it's just evaporating into this atmosphere of analysis all the time. Beauty can be reduced to just have practical functions. Sometimes the adornment of something, beautification of something doesn't necessarily have a function, but aesthetically it's pleasing, so it makes life more joyful. In Virgo, this becomes restricted and then Ketu negates it. So Venus feels like it's suffocating here. But again, we can talk about something that is profound that can come out of this placement too. The combination of Venus, Ketu, Virgo. For instance, Virgo represents refinement, purification, and practical intellect. And in this environment, Venus-Ketu conjunction can show us what actually remains of beauty when the indulgent and the lusty aspect of it is stripped away. What remains of love when appearances disappear. What remains of intimacy when the performance and the fantasies are gone, which is the inevitability of every long-term relationship. So it's kind of like, yeah, when you start a relationship, you don't want this conjunction. You want to be, to some degree, idealizing the other. You want to have a sense of fantasy about it. But it's almost like bringing a Saturnine thing here. Reality will reveal itself over time. So when you have this kind of a conjunction from the get-go, you're dealing with these kinds of themes. You don't have the luxury of the rose-colored glasses. And that's not necessarily a bad thing if you can learn how to deal with that and negotiate with that, because you understand what it actually means to love someone. You understand what the essence of someone, love and beauty in itself is. And in some sense, through the transit, or if you have this in your birth chart, something that we have to understand with Venus, Ketu, and Virgo is that love, beauty is being distilled. Connections are going down to their most essential form. And in the sign of Virgo, love, we have to come to accept love as service, beauty as a kind of a purity, intimacy as the practical acts of care. Like if you have Venus in Virgo in general, taking out the garbage is an act of love because you're showing that you give a damn and you care, that sense of duty. So love is just becoming very practical and stripped down to its essence. So this placement in general is not about indulgence. It's about endurance. It's not about glamour. It's about truth. And again, when we think about it, we do want these components in our love life, in the long haul of life, don't we? I mean, like you can be romancing someone 24/7, but honestly, it's becoming cheesy. Romance is good in the middle of real life, like in these intervals in a long-term relationship all the time. It's just not feasible. You can't maintain it. It's unrealistic. So this combination is showing us like, how do you get to the bottom of it? What is this relationship about? It's about how do I care for you when there is no more beauty? And that's the inevitability of age. It's a different kind of a beauty, but it's not the kinds of things that we associate to what it means to be attracted to someone. But how do you still love them? How do you maintain the attraction, that quality, that magnetism of Venus when you can't linger on the surface aspects of things anymore? So Venus conjunct Ketu in Virgo is not easy love, but it's the enduring kinds. If we can learn its lessons, even if we don't have this placement, if we can learn to love like this, we are becoming better lovers in life. So what can we do with this alignment in general? First and foremost, we can't sugarcoat it. We have to acknowledge that it's challenging and it's difficult for a human being. We eat for pleasure. We do a lot of things for pleasure. And this aspect of it is either going into overanalysis in the sign of Virgo, or it's getting numbed out by Ketu. So that pleasure aspect of Venus is really being dimmed down. And that's hard. And in some ways, we can either look at this as something that is about punishment, or it's a placement that is showing us or encouraging us to purify our ideas about connections, love, and beauty. It's about learning the value of the essence of things rather than the appearance of things. It's showing you how to be real in life. It's choosing truth over indulgence, connection, and the truth of what that means, which is existence itself in a lot of ways, if you think about it, rather than the fantasies of what you need to be connected to so that your life has a sense of meaning, so that you feel like that you exist. And in practical terms, the way that this transit looks is really about reassessing our relationships. Are they based on appearance, fantasies, idealizations, or are we actually seeing the core essence of another human being? Do they see the core essence of us? It's also about redefining beauty. Is it decorative, or is it actually something very essential for the existence of something? Because beauty is denoting health, is about that which is healthy, then it can be life generating. Decorative stuff, yes, they look beautiful, but they're not necessarily denoting health if it's superficial. It's not life generating. So to get to the essence of it, that's what we're trying to figure out. And it's also about reevaluating pleasures. Is it indulgence or is it something that restores health? And Venus has a lot to do with health. There's this voluptuousness about Venus. It's of the water elements. It's about fertility. When you think about it, the sign of Taurus has a lot to do with our health, which is a sign that belongs to Venus. So it's saying something about the nature of Venus. Did I say the Venus? I hope not. But if I did, that's a Persian in me. So at best, this transit, or if we have this in our birth chart, the conjunction of Venus and Ketu in Virgo is allowing us to grow beyond the illusions of love and beauty. It's helping us to find meaning in simplicity, in service, in essence. And that is a beautiful thing. Hard, difficult, not fun, but at its core, that is a beautiful thing to understand. So again, not a comfortable alignment. Venus is kind of getting stripped off of its pleasures because of Ketu, and it's debilitated in the sign of Virgo. It's like Venus is breaking off into a million pieces because of the analysis of Virgo instead of bringing all the parts together. And then it's not allowed to really have a feeling about it because Ketu is like, oh, numb it down. But through this discomfort, we're offered a profound lesson. Again, that love, beauty, and connection cannot be occurring on a surface level. We have to understand what the essence of it is. And if we can stay with this lesson, we can find love, we can create beauty that is practical and it's lasting, it's enduring, it's true. And before closing off, getting to the end of the video, if you like the content of this video, I invite you to like, subscribe, and comment. You guys know I love, love, love your comments. And I love how I'm getting to know you. And if you want your own chart reading, you can go to the links in the description box below or to parisayazdi.com. And I'll leave you with this. My hope is that this conjunction and this placement will remind us that love, beauty, and connection cannot be sustained by appearances, only by essence. So when pleasure fades or form dissolves, may we find the wisdom to recognize what is truly important and essential. And may that guide our values and our bonds. And may we have the discernment to see the truth of beauty beyond its appearance, to its source, to its essence, which is love itself. That's it for today. Sending you much love. Till next time.